Now I have two sections. There is a section, there's this section, there's also a section that I teach on Wednesday mornings. It's in this room at 9 o'clock. I also don't mind if you ever happen to miss a class, you're welcome to come and sit in. Those students are in the web program, but they're also in semester 2, so they started in the web program back in September, the same time that most of you started, okay? Because it's pretty much the same lesson Mondays and Wednesdays, I'm not going to record the same lesson twice, so sometimes you may go on YouTube and see a lesson, and it may have been from the Wednesday section, but it basically are covering, it's the same course delivered twice. Okay? So kind of want to look at where we're going, and a big part of the goal in this course is all of you are used to using the web every day as an end user, and what I want you to start to do is see it not as an end user, but as a web developer would see it. So I'll give you some examples. So for example, anybody ever been here? Yeah, you've been there? Right? So the average person goes to San Francisco, that's what we see. We see the Golden Gate Bridge. Okay? However, if you're an engineer, you don't just see the bridge that way. You also can look at that bridge and you're thinking about this, right? How's that actually put together? Average person might see one of these. If you're this guy, you know, you can see that and you're imagining what's under the hood. Okay? We might, on TV, we might see this guy, and if that's our job, you know, we're thinking in terms of this. What's actually happening underneath that the average person doesn't see. Okay? And finally, we all see this. I'm sure many of you have already seen this page today. So if you're this guy, which is really what we're training you all to be, we want you to be able to look at that and think, what's happening underneath? How's this all put together? How does this work? Okay. So a lot of, I think I mentioned, a lot of what we're going to do is kind of deconstructing the things that we do every day that we see and we use online and think about how it's built. So we want to think of it in terms of code. We also want to think in terms of architecture and structure. How are these things put together? Because really all web applications really work in the same way. So a big part of this class is to try and teach you the fundamentals. Once you understand the fundamentals, you can really build anything. Okay? And the stuff we do in later courses, in advanced web programming in the fall, and then your enterprise computing class, which you'll have next year, is really just using different technologies to do more and more advanced versions of the same thing. Okay? So really, I mean, here's the architecture, here's what we need. Everything we do in this class revolves around this. We've got some kind of client using some kind of internet-enabled device. Could be a laptop, could be a desktop, could be a mobile device. And what they want to do is interact with some kind of web page. So those pages are stored on a web server somewhere. You guys all have web server accounts. I'll also show you how you could run your own web server on your own machine if you want to do that. And basically what we're doing is our client wants some kind of information that typically is stored in a database somewhere. Right? We want access to something, some kind of information. So what we need is we need some kind of programming or scripting language that can interpret what is it that that client wants and how do we interact with the database. Okay? That's why you guys are taking this class, and probably most of you are taking relational database at the same time. Right? So that you can learn how to build and manipulate databases. And that knowledge is going to feed into this class. Okay, who do you have for databases? Jarrett? Probably a lot of you?
Data.
Right, so most of you have Jarrett. So I've taught that course many times, so I know Jarrett and I actually are in the same office, so I have a pretty good understanding of how the skills from that course will translate into this course. It's not critical because I'm still going to give you the database commands that you need. It's just helpful in terms of understanding the database piece and being able to build that out on your own. Okay, but it is not a requirement for this course. Okay, and I have had many people take this course without that database course and they do just fine. Okay, so don't panic. Okay. So really we're going to look at how do we integrate, so some of the technologies you learned last semester with Scott, HTML, CSS, some of the stuff you're going to be learning with Jarrett, and how do we put that all together to build a solution that runs online. Okay, that's really what we're looking at. There's more good news for you. For many people, the fact they can roll out of bed in the morning, pull up their phone, you know, go ahead and buy something or check their stocks or do their banking, they think this is some kind of magic. Okay? It really isn't magic. All it is basically programming fundamentals and using the HTTP protocol. Okay? So all web applications kind of work the same way. Right? We've got some kind of data that we want to access, people want to access through some kind of internet-enabled device. So let's think about some simple examples. Okay? Let's think about Facebook. What kind of data are we interested in when we go to Facebook? I mean, I've seen people on Facebook during the class. Why do you go? What do you want to see when you're there? Where's the information on Facebook come from?
Other users.
Okay, so information, what specifically? What kinds of information are other users, what kind of data is other users making available that you're interested in?
What they're doing.
Okay, so what they're doing, yep. Videos.
User profiles.
Profiles.
Birthday reminders.
Okay, people's birthdays. What else do you go on Facebook to see?
The potential for doing criminal activity.
Okay, could be. Right. So where is all that data stored? Yeah, it's stored in Facebook's database, right? If we could look in Facebook's database, we would see tables that store all of this stuff, right? And how many people check Facebook more than once a day? Okay. Why? Why do you check it more than once a day? Yeah, because that data is constantly changing, right? So really all Facebook is a web application that shows you certain sets of data that you want to see. Okay? It's nothing more than that. Actually, I ordered on here the other day. What kinds of data would you expect if Amazon let us see what their database looks like? What kinds of things would we expect to see? What does Amazon store in their database that we can look at online? Products would probably be the main one. What other things would be in there? Pricing? Yep, could be. Yeah, product reviews. That's a really important, right? Before you buy something, you want to see what other people have.
Customer trends.
Yep.
Buying trends. Metadata.
Okay, could be.
Account information.
Yeah, information about your account, shipping addresses, your order history, right? All Amazon really is a database, okay? And basically the main two tables are here. They show us products. That's what we want to see, right? That's what we want from them. And what Amazon wants from us is they want us, so they put the products in so we can see them online. And what they want us to do is use their application to create new orders in their database, right? That's why it exists. This is usually the first site I look at every morning. What kinds of things does the Globe and Mail's website, what kinds of data does it show us? What would we expect to see in their database?
Articles.
Yep, that would probably be the main one. But what else would be in there besides articles?
Dates.
Yep, dates. What other thing? Sorry? Absolutely, advertisements. Amazon and Facebook would have those as well. What else would you find in there if they gave us a copy of their database and we could look at it?
Account information.
Yep, so information about the subscribers, the users. Anything else you can think of?
Authors.
Yeah, the writers, right? We could click on a writer's name and it should be able to bring up all of the articles that they've written. Right? They've also got video, they've got images, they've got comments, right? We can read a news story or an article and we can make a comment. We can actually contribute. We're not only reading the content from the newspaper, we can actually contribute to that content. I don't like this article, this writer doesn't know what they're talking about. So all of these applications, they really all work the same way. I like to think of it, kind of give it an analogy that a web application is actually kind of like a pub. Okay? We've got a bunch of different pieces, and ultimately we want to deliver stuff that our users or our customers want. We'll look at this a little more closely. Okay? So we got our pub over here on my right. We've got a web application. We've got Facebook on the left. Okay? So in each case, both the pub and the web application have something somebody want, right? On Facebook, we want information about our friends or their criminal activity. In the pub, we want drinks. Right? But in both cases, The end user, we have no access to get what we want. What would happen if you walked into the pub? Can you walk behind the bar and just pour yourself, start mixing margaritas? What would happen to you?
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work, right? Same thing if you want to get information from Facebook. We don't have direct access to their database. We can't go in directly and pull out what we want. We have to go through their website that controls what we can see and manages what we get access to. So in a bar, the drinks are stored on shelves behind the bar. And in any kind of database, doesn't matter whether it's Facebook, the Globe and Mail, Amazon, or anything else, we've got a database that's storing that information. Okay? And as you said, that data is always changing, which is why you go back to Facebook again and again. You want to see what's in there that wasn't there an hour ago or 5 minutes ago. Okay? So if we can't get this stuff directly, how does it work? Right? In the pub, rather than going behind the bar, you give a set of instructions to this guy. Right? He works there. He'll take your order. Okay? So this is similar in a web application where we can make a request. We can tell the server what it is that we want. How do we do that as a user? So if I'm on Facebook, how do I tell Facebook what information I want to see? What's the simplest way for me to indicate what I want? Yeah, I can usually click something. You know, if I click your profile, if I click your name, that's telling Facebook, show me your profile.
It's more like input.
Yeah, it's an input. Or I could type in the search bar and hit enter, and it will send that request, right? That's really the same thing as when your server comes around to your table, and everybody at the table tells the server what it is they want. So now we've made that request. So what does the server do in the bar, right? Server comes to your table, you're sitting around the table, everybody orders. What does the server do next?
Takes your order, goes to the back of the bar.
Yeah, he's going to take it to the bar. So the same thing happens when we make a request online, right? We click on someone's Facebook avatar or their name, we're sending that request off to the server. And in each case, we've got kind of a way of issuing these instructions, right? In the bar, our server may have one of these, right? They may have an order pad where they list what everybody wants, or maybe they'll try and remember it. Okay? In a web application, what we're using and why most of you are taking the database class is SQL is the language that allows us to tell the database what we want. I want Shane's profile. Okay, so we issue an SQL instruction that will go for all the millions of profiles in Facebook. We don't want them all. We just want one. So if things are working properly, eventually our server is going to come back with all our drinks. Or if our web application's running properly, we request somebody's profile, we're going to get some data that comes back from the database. Okay? So then our server is going to hand everybody their drinks. And in this case, if maybe what we want to see was somebody's photo gallery, our page is going to load with all the photos that user uploaded. Okay? But in both cases, we have a number of different pieces working. This isn't something we can just go and do by ourselves. Okay? So in the pub, we've got all of these different things set up to allow somebody to come in and get drinks we want. We've got a bar that holds the drinks. Well, in a web application, you've got a database that holds the content. News articles, products, profiles, whatever that data is. We've got a place for people to come. So in a bar, people can sit down or they can go to the bar. And in the case of web application, we have some kind of device that uses HTTP. Could be one of these, one of these, one of these, one of these, right? In the pub, we've got the menu. It tells people what's available. And on the web, we've got our HTTP protocol. It defines what kinds of requests users can make. Then we've got our server that takes the instructions. And in a web application, that's what we're using HTML for. And we'll look at how do we get instructions from users with HTML by using HTML forms. You guys may have played around with them a little bit in Scott's class, I'm not sure. If you haven't, by the end of this class, you'll have built so many HTML forms you'll be able to do it in a snap. Okay. And then our server has a notepad for taking our instructions, and that's really the function of PHP. Okay. That's the logic or the brains here. When you learned HTML, we can make a web page that looks nice and use with CSS, but it doesn't actually do anything. There's no logic, there's no ability to process. So what PHP does is it takes that user request and gives them the data they want. So I want to see this photo album, or I want to review this product on Amazon. Okay? We're going to use PHP to do that processing. That's our interaction between the web browser and our database. PHP will go in between the two of them. It's kind of a messenger running back and forth. Okay? And then the last thing we have, just like in the pub, we have the bartender that will take those instructions and get the drinks. Really, that's what we're using SQL for. It's our set of instructions to the database. Select these photos from this user, or check this person's username and password and see if they have an account, or save their new order to the database so we can ship them their products. So it would be great if we had one technology. In desktop development, we don't need all these different pieces. You want to build a Java application? Well, Java defines the user interface, all the boxes and drop downs and buttons and screens, and all of the logic and programming is still done with Java. On the web, we don't have that ability because browsers are stupid. The only thing browsers understand is HTML, so we have to use HTML for developing the interface. But then we need some other kind of server-side scripting language to do the thinking and all the processing. So PHP is one option we have. It's probably the simplest language to learn, which is why we use it in this class for an introduction. What other options do we have if we didn't want to use PHP? What else could we use for that server-side scripting piece?
JSP.
We could use JSP, so Java on the server.
Can you use Servlets?
Yeah, we could use Java servlets.
ASP.NET?
We could use ASP.NET, which is what you guys will do in your enterprise computing class, in your finals, in second year, in your fourth academic semester. We could use Python. It's not used very much. There's a couple other.
You use frameworks.
Yeah,
Go from Google?
we could.
Node?
The other really popular one now is Node.js, so JavaScript that runs on the server. And in fact, when you guys come back here next fall in advanced web programming, that's what we're going to teach you. I'm not sure if I'll be teaching you or Tom will be teaching you, but we're going to do JavaScript on the server with Node, which is lightning fast. Okay? So by the time you're finished your 2 years, you're going to have learned 3 different ways of building web applications. We can build them with PHP, we can build them with Node.js, or we can build them with ASP.NET and C#. But they all have the same fundamentals. They all work in similar ways. You know, we start with PHP because, as I said, it's the simplest, it's the easiest to learn. Okay, so the skills you learn in other courses are going to build on top of this one. So just to show you a quick preview of what we're going to be building this term, and then we'll dive into PHP a bit more. So here's the completed application. So when I had a few sections of the class last summer. So this is the application that we built. Every week in class, we built a new feature onto it. So I can show you what it looks like. So you notice down here at the bottom, we've got a live weather preview here. And we've got a page where I can create an account with a little Google anti-spam. So everything I'm showing you on here, we're going to learn how to do. Okay, so I can create an account. I could log in. So we'll talk about security and authentication after reading week. How do we make our websites password protected so that only we can control who has access to them? So when I log in, I've got a couple options, and you'll notice my menu changed here. Once I'm logged in, the register and login links go away, and I have these 4 links. So what we did was we made a movies page. So all of this data will come from our database. So we set up a simple movies table in our database, and I could add movies. I could go in and make changes if I want to edit them. We can upload movie posters, so we'll look at how to do file uploads. I could also delete any movie from here, and it will give me this neat little confirmation in case I accidentally click on delete. We'll make sure the users really want to delete. We could search for one or more keywords, and it will filter our list of movies. I can also sort these. So if I go back, and let's say I want to sort them by year, I can click and it will go in ascending order with this little arrow. If I click it again, we'll go in descending order. We'll also look at how to integrate Facebook comments. into any web application rather than building our own comment stream. Well, Facebook gives us the ability to just use theirs. So we'll look at how we integrate that as well. We'll also look at, once we've uploaded all these movie posters, how do we make an image gallery out of them? Kind of similar to a Facebook photo album. So we'll do that in, I think it's lesson 10. How do we upload files and how do we build an image gallery? Okay. And if I log out, so I'll just grab that address. If I open up a different browser where I'm not logged in, so I'll try and load my gallery page here. I'm not logged in, but because I'm not logged in, I get kicked right back to the home page. It forces me to log in. So that's all the functionality. So we're going to build a similar web application to this through the term. So you can probably see that's quite a lot of features. We'll kind of do one feature each week. So this is one of the other reasons you want to come to class, because if you come on week 3 and you're not on week 2, well, you're going to be missing some of the stuff we did on week 2, and we want to keep adding on. Okay. So this is kind of where we're going, and we're going to build a very similar application in this class. Okay, so I'll show you this one. Usually most weeks I'll show you at the beginning, okay, here's what we're doing today. Here's what it's going to look like when we're done. So the idea is when you're done this term, you'll have one of these applications that you will have built on your own, start to finish. Okay, and you'll have written all the code yourself. So by then you should have a pretty good understanding of how all this stuff works. Okay, so what I want to do is build a similar application. We built it with movies in my summer section. So what I've done is put up a little poll. Now, you can build anything you like. I don't care what you make your application about. But I've put up a little poll. Rather than me making the sample application about movies, I've suggested a few other topics here. So if you go on Blackboard and just scroll down to this item, you can click on the link, or you can send a text message or a tweet, and you can vote as to what we should make our little in-class. So this is not for marks. This is just what we'll be doing, building in class every week. So I encourage you either go to the Poll Everywhere site or send a text or send a tweet. And here we'll see the results updating in real time about what we should make our application about. Again, if you want to make your application about something else, that's fine. Yours will just look a little bit different, and you'll have some different fields on yours from what I'm going to do. Sandwiches isn't doing very well. So I will build mine with whatever has the highest vote. But like I said, you can either follow me or you can build it but use your own set of data instead of what I use. Pardon? You shouldn't have to register. You should just be able to vote as a guest. I don't think you have to. It's anonymous, so I don't know. I'll use this. It's a kind of a fun little tool. I'll try and use it in class from time to time. All right, so it looks like we've got a winner for this section. So in my application that I build in class, I'll have a games, and when we go ahead and build this, I'll put in fields that are relevant to video games. Okay, but if you want to do something else, that's fine. You're not obligated to build it along with me. It's just your code will be a little different, right? You may have some different field names here from what I have. Okay, so one of the things we're going to need to do when we set it up next week, we'll need to set up a games table in our database with some proper fields, right? We'll need a name and a publisher and whatever other fields would be appropriate to video games. We'll also have to get some pictures because later on we'll do file uploads. So we'll need a picture for each game. Okay, so yeah, there's our winner. Video games. Okay. So I've given you a very high-level introduction. We haven't talked about PHP specifically. So if you just scroll up on Blackboard, there's another link here. Here's what I want you to do. You're going to take 10 minutes. This is a bit of a class research and brainstorming exercise. Rather than me just ramble on about PHP, you guys are going to do a little bit of research. Okay? So when you click on this link, what can you learn about PHP in 10 minutes? It will take you here. Now, you can log in with any social media account. You don't have to log in. You can just say work as a guest if you want. If you say you're a guest, it'll prompt you for your name. So what I want you to do, I've given you a few basic questions here about PHP. Okay? Some of the benefits, syntax, websites that use it. And I've given you a little screenshot as to how you make a comment on here. If you click on this comment button and just drag and drop, it'll open up a comment box that you can type in. Yeah, I put a big sticky note in the middle. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes, do a little research online, make a comment, and put your name in it, and a few answers to some of the questions. Okay? So when we're all done, we should have compiled as a class a pretty good set of study notes about PHP. And some of the questions on your midterm exam are probably going to come straight from here. So take 10 minutes, do a little reading online, and make a comment where you're answering some basic questions about PHP. Back with our last hour. I see you guys did a pretty good job, despite the yellow scribbles, which at least are behind the comment boxes. So like I said, I'm not going to go over everything. I'm going to leave this up for you. This link will stay here. I'll leave the board up. So just a few relevant things that people pointed out that I think are important for you to know. A few people pointed out that one of the reasons PHP is so popular is that it's open source and it's free, right? So there's no cost. You don't need any particular software. You can build PHP applications using Notepad. One of the other things I noted people said is that it's platform independent. This is also one of the big benefits, right? You can run it on Linux, you can run it on Windows, you can run it on Mac OS. And many other server-side technologies are not necessarily platform independent. Okay? So PHP's probably, I would say that the popularity is on the wane, that newer technologies like ASP.NET and Node.js are becoming more and more popular. One of the reasons there's so much PHP out there is it's so easy to learn that people without even without a programming background can go ahead and learn it. Okay? Somebody mentioned about the syntax. A couple things I just want to point out. So PHP is C-based. So the good news for you guys, most of you already taken at least one course in Java. So the syntax of PHP is going to look familiar to you. Okay, so curly braces, semicolons, things like that you've already seen. So most of the constructs from Java apply directly to PHP. Okay, so that makes it easy for a Java developer to learn. Somebody noted here, I guess I should zoom in a little bit. So PHP code blocks, all of our PHP goes inside of these tags. So we have an opening and closing brace, and any PHP code we want to run has to go inside of that. Now we can have as many of those PHP blocks as we need on a page. So most of our PHP pages, we kind of have a mix. We'll have a little HTML, and then we need to do some processing or something on PHP. Then we'll have a block of code, more HTML, more PHP. So there's no limit to how many different blocks of PHP code we might have on a particular page. Right? This is also very important. I can tell you right now there will be tests on the midterm exam about this. The PHP commands are not case sensitive, so if you type if, doesn't matter whether you put it in all caps or capital I or all lowercase. But your variable names, your function names, and also the names of the pages and the names of your folders, those are case sensitive. Okay? So for example, PHP will treat those as two entirely separate things. So what I would suggest you do is one of two things to make sure that your code, you don't trip yourself up with case sensitivity. You have two options. The first one is to use this kind of syntax, which is called what? You all learned it last semester. Right, using camel case. So your first word is lowercase, but when you have multiple words in the name of a function or variable, you then capitalize the first letter of any words after the first. That's one option. The other option, which I prefer, is I never use capitals at all in PHP. So I'll name my variables with underscores instead. Or if I have the name of a page where there's two words, like order details, I'll write it like this. Order underscore, or I might use a dash details. So I will never, you'll never see capital letters in anything I name. No function names, no variable names, page name, folder names.
So
Okay?
those two find the underscore as the, what did you call it?
Well, whenever I'm defining a word, I want to use a term and there's multiple words in it, to make it more readable, I'll separate the multiple words with an underscore.
Okay.
The other format people use would be this, where they capitalize the first letter of any subsequent words. Both of these are correct. I like this one because my rule when I'm coding PHP is I never name anything with a capital letter. I never use capitals ever.
Okay.
That way I never get confused.
Yeah.
Where did I use a capital? Where did I not? My rule is I'm always using lowercase for everything. I find that's easier. So for example, here on the web server, if I try and load the page this way with a capital M, even though it's the same page name,
Yeah.
with the capital M, Apache doesn't know what that file name is. So I will always use lowercase for everything. So you can use this, it's correct, but I find there's more margin for error when you use that. Okay, so it's important to note, and I guarantee you I will give you at least one question on your midterm exam where I show you the variable but spelled differently and making sure that you catch that PHP is case sensitive. Okay. Many people pointed out a really important point, that it's a scripting language. So PHP requires a web server to interpret the script. We can't just create a PHP page, save it, and open up in our browser. We can do it, but the PHP code won't execute if we do that. Okay? So we need several things for our PHP code to execute. The first one is it needs to go inside of those PHP brackets. The second thing is we need to actually load that page from a web address. And it could be on a web server, and you all have accounts with DreamHost, or it could be a local web server, and I'll show you how to install a local web server in a bit, so you can run everything locally. Also, in order for PHP to run, our pages have to have a particular extension, and a few people mentioned it on here. What extension, file extension do we need? Right. We're always, so pretty much every page we build this semester will have a .php extension. Anybody know what happens? What happens if we write PHP code and we put it in a block, but we save that file with the .htm or .html extension? What will happen if we try to run the page in the browser?
Processes and HTML.
Right, the HTML will still show up. The PHP code just gets ignored. If it doesn't have a PHP extension, the code never gets interpreted and it just doesn't execute. So only the HTML we put on that page will run. We'll actually try that and we'll see what happens. Okay. There's one other really important point that a few people mentioned, and again, there will be an exam question on this. Somebody who put a note on here about, it's kind of hard for me to find, about data types or typing, variable typing in PHP. What did you say about it? It's Raymond, right?
PHP is dynamically typed, which means that PHP is dynamically typed, unlike other languages we were learning, which are statically typed.
Right, okay, so there's a couple ways. There's statically and dynamic. Those are also referred to as strongly typed and loosely typed. So PHP is loosely typed. A language like Java is strongly typed. What's the difference? And it's really important as a developer that you understand the difference. What's a strongly typed language versus a loosely typed language? It's okay, you can guess.
With loosely typed, you don't have to define variable type, data type.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So in a language like Java, if I create a variable called, year, what would happen if I try and give it a value? What would happen if I try this in Java?
You get an error.
Right, and what's that error going to say, roughly? What would the error message be?
Undefined.
Never.
Incorrect
Can't
value.
change string to.
Yeah, it would say invalid data type or cannot convert string to, because probably we're going to declare this as an integer, right? It's only going to hold a number. So in Java, we can't do this, right? If we say year is an integer, then this will give us an error. Or if we try and give this a value of January 11th, 2015, or if we try and give it a value of false, we're going to get errors in all those cases. Okay? PHP is loosely typed, which means PHP will allow you to do this. Now, this is a good news, bad news scenario as developers. Why is this good and why is this not so good that PHP is loosely typed?
So the main reason is the two times in which types are checked, either runtime or compile time. During compile time, which is how statically typed languages check for types, if you said a cat was a dog, it will catch that at compile time. If you said a cat was a dog at runtime, it will wait till it runs into that, then it will fail.
Right, so why is that bad? Why are strongly typed languages, what's the advantage over a loosely typed language from a developer's point of view?
It's hard to make a mistake inside.
Right.
Hard to
Our Java editor is going to catch this, right? We're never even going to be able to run our program because our code editor is going to say, no, you can't do this, right? Which comes back to Raymond's point. PHP says, okay, that's fine, except what happens when we try and use that in a calculation 10 years from now and we've given it a value of ABC? It's going to crash. But it doesn't crash when we're building the web page. It crashes when our end user tries to load that code in the browser, right? So this is more flexible. We have more freedom and flexibility with a loosely typed language, but it also means we're going to get more errors, and those errors are harder to fix, right? Because we have to fix them on our own. If we do this in Java, if we're using NetBeans or Eclipse, the editor will catch this error and fix it. It'll tell us that this is wrong. In PHP, we can just go ahead and do this. We could try and, add 10 years to this, and then it's going to crash when the page is actually running. Okay? So PHP, in the one hand, it throws very few errors. It lets us do many things, like output a variable that we didn't define or give a value to. PHP will just print a blank, get nothing. Whereas a language like Java or C#, if we try and output a variable that we didn't create or define, it'll say undefined variable, right? So at least we know when we're testing, okay, we know what we did wrong. So loosely typed languages are flexible, but we're also going to get more errors, and those errors are going to be harder to fix. Okay. So if nobody's made a comment on here that PHP is loosely typed and that it means that variables have no data type, maybe somebody could go and add that on the comment box. I will definitely want you to know that on your midterm. Okay. I think those are most of the things about PHP I wanted to cover. Anybody have any questions or think there's anything else relevant from here that we should talk about? I'll leave this link up in week 1, so you can always come back and refer to these notes. Okay, so please don't delete them. Okay, we should talk about software. A few people have already asked about servers and software. Inside of Weekly Learning, the very first folder says links, tools, and resources. So any things I want to make available to you guys that aren't particular to a certain topic or lesson, they're just kind of for general use in the course, I'll stick in here. So one of the things I'll include in here is the link to the YouTube playlist as well. It'll be inside of links and resources. So there are a few things in here I want to show you. Okay. Now, as I said, you can use anything to develop PHP applications. I wouldn't recommend using Notepad, but you could. Okay. What I would suggest, you could use Visual Studio Code. I'm going to use Phpstorm. These are all free tools. Okay, so Phpstorm, there is a license, but if you say you're a student, I think, and register with a student email account, you get, I think it's a 1-year license, and you can renew it. So I'm going to use Phpstorm. Expression Web is old, it's from Microsoft, but it's also free. The reason that I like these two the best, Phpstorm and Expression Web, is they have code hinting. So if I start typing in either HTML or PHP, the editors will prompt me with code possibilities that are relevant to what I'm doing. And I'll show you that in a bit. Okay? Brackets is another common one. Sublime Text is another free one. But I find that Phpstorm and Expression Web have the best code hinting. So I'm probably going to use Phpstorm in class. You can use any editor you like. I know I have students use Java editors. You want to use NetBeans or Eclipse for doing PHP? Totally up to you. Use any editor you like. I'd encourage you to download and install. These are all free. They're not very large. Try them. See which one you like. I'll probably use Phpstorm in the class. I really like Visual Studio Code. The support for PHP is great. The problem is it only does HTML code hinting when your pages have a .htm extension. And all our pages are going to have .php extensions. So when you do this, it ignores your HTML and doesn't give you code hinting, which drives me nuts. So I'm going to use Phpstorm. So those links are here. Now in terms of connecting to the web server, I think I actually have done a little video walkthrough that's on YouTube. Oh yeah, it is. It's right here. Now you guys, if you had class with Scott last term, you probably used DreamHost already and you're familiar with, you have your credentials and you know how to connect to DreamHost. I've put all the instructions here. If you haven't done it or you don't remember because it was a while ago, you can ignore this because you're not on the lab computers. Some of our older students, they're using labs. So from your own computer, you'll want to download and install Filezilla for free. If you were here last semester, you already have it. And you have an email. You just have to go into your student email and do a search for the word DreamHost and you'll find your credentials in there. You will have an email. If you don't have web host credentials, just send me an email and I'll forward those to IT support. So send me an email if you need them and I will get Greg to set up an account for you. Okay? You don't have to use DreamHost in class every week because we're going to be working. You know, we add a bit of code, we save our file, we want to try it. You can upload it constantly to the server and run it off the server. You don't have to. And I've also showed you how you get at those pages. So I've done a whole little walkthrough here. I'm not sure how long this video is, where I've shown you how to do it. So when you give me stuff for your assignments in your labs, those things you're going to have to upload and run on DreamHost. Obviously, you can't just run them on your local machine. So you're going to have to upload those to the web. So the 5 labs and the 2 assignments. But in class, as we're building out our video game application, you can do that stuff locally because you don't have to submit this work to me every week. Okay? So if you want to work locally, is there anybody using a Mac in here? Yeah. Okay. So if you are using a Mac, what I recommend is you can install Xampp. So Xampp runs on anything. It's free, and here's the link. It's right here. You don't have to write it down. You can go to apachefriends.org/index.html, choose the Mac installer and install it. You don't need it for today, so you can just do it before next week's class. It will run on Windows. You also have the option to use Wamp Server. I think I have Wamp installed on my machine. So that will mean in class, rather than constantly uploading to the server and checking things, you can just save your files locally and we'll run everything on localhost. So it saves time in class to use the local server. So everything I've listed on here is free. And you don't need both Xampp and Wamp, but you need one or the other if you want to work locally. Otherwise, you'll have to copy all your files to the web server every time you save a change. Okay? So what I would suggest is you get one of these installed and configured before class next week. I have office hours the next few days, so try and do it sooner rather than later. So if you need help, come and see me in office hours over in A building and I'll help make sure your server's set up properly. The other advantage when you install these, because for Jarrett's class you're also going to need MySQL and MySQL Workbench. These MySQL Workbench and SQL Server and Workbench, they come bundled with these. So then you'll also have your local database server, which you can use not only for my class but for Jarrett's class as well.
So
And
Wamp Server will work for both of the classes, or is it?
Well, for Jared's class, you don't need the Apache server that it installs, but you will need the MySQL server for both classes. And these install MySQL for you, which is great. Okay. The instructions for connecting to MySQL are here. And again, you'll need those both for my class and for Jared's class. In a few weeks, you won't need these instructions because you're going to do it every week in 2 different classes. So it's going to be, you're going to know how to do it pretty soon. Oh, actually, I do have my playlist. So here's my YouTube playlist, I think. I actually have my lessons. I started recording last summer. I started in week 4. So you can actually watch me build out and watch the lessons from last summer. Most of what we're doing in class is already on YouTube. So I'll still record the next few weeks, and then we'll figure out whether last summer's lessons, whether I need to even bother recording these, or whether we'll just use the ones from last summer, because the content hasn't changed very much. PHP really hasn't changed much from last summer till now. We'll be doing the same code. Okay, so that link is here. A couple of other useful things. I created a little language reference document. This was more by request of the web students. It's probably not as useful to you guys who've already done Java, but just some basic things about PHP syntax, like when do we use round brackets versus when do we use curly brackets? When do we use square brackets? What are some of the built-in collections? So this is just here as a simple reference for you, because a few of the web students asked me for it last year. We'll also use Bootstrap for CSS later. We're not going to write any CSS of our own. We're going to use Bootstrap so we can add some CSS onto our little video games application. And the last thing is just kind of a neat tool. If you want to see any website you're working on, you want to see what it looks like on a mobile device, there's a link to a mobile emulator where you can click choose a mobile device, and so long as your website is online, you've uploaded to the server, you can check and see what it's going to look like on different types of mobile devices. So through the term, there may be other things, other tools that we think of or people suggest. If there's other links, then I'll throw them in here. Okay. So we've got a few minutes. I think we've done most of, just open this up. So really what we want to do is, everything we do in this class is really building all of this, right? We've got some data, like we talked about earlier. We've got some data in a database, and we want to build an application that can talk to that data, right? Maybe we're pulling data out so people can see stuff, or maybe we're letting our users give us data, and we want to use PHP to ultimately dump that data inside of a database. So no matter what kind of web application we're building, any of the ones we've looked at today, including this one, they all do the same thing. So once we understand how web application works, well, then we can take anybody's requirements, we can go ahead and build it, right? So we need a little HTML and CSS for the front end. We need to know how to make a database and store data, how to use SQL to manipulate it, and then we just need to know some kind of server-side scripting language that will do all the processing, will be the brains of this whole thing. Okay. So let's make our first PHP page. So I'm going to go ahead, open up. You can open up any code editor. You can even use, a basic text editor for today if you haven't installed one of those applications. You have, I heard somebody mention Notepad++, works fine for doing PHP development, no problem. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up Phpstorm. I'm actually going to build a page and upload it to the server today. I won't work locally. We'll just build a quick page. We'll fire it up to the web server. So you can open up any text editor, any code editor. Where am I going to put this? Okay. So what I like to do, what I suggest you do wherever you're going to store the files for your course, what I would suggest you do is make a folder for this course. So I already have, actually, where do I want to make it? So I've got a folder. I'm going to make a folder. I suggest you make yours lowercase. I put mine in all caps, which wasn't very smart. So create a folder called COMP1006 anywhere on your machine, wherever you want to save the work you've been doing in class. But again, I suggest you make it lowercase. Now we're going to be building a lot of files each week. So what I like to do is make a new subfolder for every week. So inside of your COMP1006, make a subfolder and call it, you don't need a lesson, call it lesson 1. And again, make it all lowercase with no spaces, because web servers don't like spaces in paths. So you're going to have COMP1006 lesson 1. So all lowercase and there's no spaces in here. So I'm just going to browse into that directory. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and add a new file here. So I'm going to say new PHP file, which is nice. My editor does this for me. And I'm just going to call this test. And it automatically says, what do you want as an extension? I'm always going to choose PHP. I'm not going to do anything else in this class. So I've got a new file. I'm actually going to get rid of everything here. We'll build this from scratch. So we'll need a little bit of HTML. Oops. So one of the reasons I like Phpstorm is you notice I created the opening tag and it automatically creates the closing tag for me. As soon as I type HTML, and notice the code hinting that I get, right? As soon as I type M, I get all of the options that come up. And now it automatically, I want char set as my attribute. If I just hit enter, it automatically chooses char set and does equal. So this saves me, these code hints save me a lot of typing. When you're using something like Notepad++, you don't get this. So I want, oops, actually I didn't want char set. This part isn't critical, but I may as well format my document properly. And I also like that it automatically puts in the opening and closing quotes for me. So my content is text HTML. We'll just put in our encoding. This is pretty standard. So it's nice because it saves me typing. I can just pick this stuff. This tag is not critical. I'll put in a title. And again, my code editor automatically closes the tag for me. Oops, I'm missing something around these tags. What tag am I missing? Yep. So after my HTML, I should have a head, and my meta and title should go inside. And I'll just indent those because they're nested inside my header. We only need one more HTML tag on here. What else should we have for good formatting? Yeah, we should have a body. So if I open the tag and just type B-O, it comes up. And as soon as I close it, Phpstorm auto closes the tag for me. So there's no PHP on here yet. But what we want to do is we want to write some PHP code and run it here. So we're going to need PHP script tags. And as soon as I finish the first tag, notice my editor auto-closed that tag for me again. Now, one of the things we want to do, and I will do pretty much in almost all or virtually all the PHP files I build, we're going to comment stuff as we go, okay? If you're not in the habit of adding comments, you'll need to get in the habit of adding comments, and I will give you marks on your big assignments for comments. Why are comments so important?
Help other people understand code.
Yep. And?
Code reusability.
Yep.
They tell you we know what we're doing.
Yep.
Why not, where did we mess up?
Yep. Besides other developers, so I mean, when you guys go out on co-op, what are the chances you're going to be working on a brand new project versus you're going to be working on an existing application and have to make changes or add on to it? The chances are probably very high that you're going to be working with someone else's code. Right? So in that case, if they've commented it, that's going to help you a lot. And in many times, the comments are actually for you. Well, why? Well, if you build an application and people use it, then over time you're going to have to go back and make changes or additions to it. Sometimes, some of the applications, actually a couple of my clients are running, still using web applications I built over 10 years ago. And occasionally they call me and they ask me to update them. Well, could you imagine trying to go to code you wrote 10 years ago and remember how that code works and what it's supposed to be doing? So in many cases, your comments aren't just for other developers, they're for you. Because if your application's successful, it's going to stand the test of time. And at some point, you're going to have to go back and change it. Okay? So comments in PHP are the exact same structure as in Java. Right? So single line comments, // multi-line comments, this way. And Phpstorm color codes, and you can see those comments are gray. Automatically, I get that color coding. So I'll just put in, this is just going to be a single line. So it's nice that our comments are in gray, so we know when we look at it, that's not active code. So all we want to do is invoke the PHP library. Like any programming language, it has dozens and dozens of built-in functions. So we just want to call one of those functions and see what happens. Okay? So the function we want to use, and again, here's where using something like Visual Studio Code or Expression Web or Phpstorm is going to help you. As soon as I type PHP, I get a list of all of those functions. So the function we want is Php Info. And we can see when we call this function, it tells us what parameters, if there are any, this function takes. So rather than us having to guess, the editor does this. Now in your Java class, what editor did you like to use for Java? NetBeans, Eclipse. I assume, though, I haven't used those in a long time, but I assume they do the same kinds of things with Java. Right? So you've probably seen, many of you are used to getting these kinds of code hints with Java. So I suggest it's a good idea to find a PHP editor that gives you the same kinds. So we're going to call this function. We're not going to pass it any parameters. And how do we terminate a command in PHP if that syntax is just like, right, we're going to need a semicolon at the end. Okay. Here is an error we're all going to make. I guarantee it. Okay. We're all going to do this. You don't have to type this code, so it'll be something like this. Line 1, line 2, line 3. Okay. If I ran this code and notice, oh, I should turn my line numbering on. I think I can do that somewhere. Should be under. Let me just see. Thank you. Right, so I'm going to turn on my line numbers. If I run this code in the browser, what line number do you suppose the PHP interpreter is going to tell us there's an error? It's actually going to tell us the error is on line 17. Now the code on line 17, we might look at it and say, no, that code is right. Why does the PHP interpreter, why would it tell me in this case that the error is on line 16?
Because without the semicolon, the line has not been terminated.
Right. Okay. The PHP interpreter without the semicolon, it'll interpret those two as one command that it can't make sense of. So it actually will say the error is on line 17. It doesn't know what line 17 is. So we're all going to do it. Even I'm going to do it. And I've taught this class 20 times. We're going to look at the line number and say, man, I'm sure the code on that line is right. I know I didn't make an error there. Why do I have an error on that line? So your clue when you see that is look on the previous line, because there's probably a missing semicolon that didn't end the line before. Okay? It's like writing two sentences without a period in the middle. Right? Without that period, the second sentence doesn't make any sense when it runs together with the first sentence. So we're all going to see this. Okay, so I'm just going to save that file. So all I want to do is connect to the web server and upload it and try this page out. Then I'll break it a couple different ways and then we'll go home. Okay. So to connect to the web server, again, if you haven't done it, the instructions are on Blackboard, but I'll just walk you through it. So I'm going to open up Filezilla. Probably you already have your connection to the server saved, so you don't have to enter your credentials every time. If you haven't done that, you can save your credentials here through this little site manager. If you just create a new site, so I created a site called DreamHost, which is the host we're using. So when I connect, here's I've got a GCR Freeman Computer Studies. This is my public folder. All of you have a public folder. It's just instead of R Freeman, it has your 9-digit student number. Any files we want to load in the browser have to go inside of that, gcrfreeman.computerstudies. So I'm going to go in there. I already have a COMP1006 folder. I'd like each of you to make a folder for this class. So all you need to do is make a folder, right-click it, and just choose Create Directory. And again, if you can't get logged in today, don't panic. I'm videoing all of this. You'll be able to do this before next class. So make a COMP1006, make it lowercase with no spaces, because that folder name is case sensitive. And then once you have a COMP1006 folder, oh, I don't have a lesson 1 folder, I have a week 1, so I'm going to make one. Just right-click in the space, and I'm going to type lesson 1, all lowercase with no spaces. And then to go into that folder, I just double-click it. So it says on the server now I have an empty directory. Right? I've created these folders, there's nothing in it. So all I want to do now is browse on my local computer to my test.php, and we'll upload it to the server, then we can look at it in the browser. So I'm going to go on my local machine, go into COMP1006, and I'll go into the lesson 1 folder for today. Now I have a bunch of crap in mine. You guys will probably just have this one page. Here's my test PHP file, dated today. And I can drag and drop it, or I can double click it, or I can just right click and choose upload. Doing any of those will copy the file from our local computer to the web server. So now we've got a copy of that file on the internet for the world to see. So now we want to just load it in the browser and see what happens. So to get to it, we'll need to go to GC and then your 9-digit student number, .computer studies with the .es, and then I'll need the COMP1006, and then I need my lesson 1 folder, and now the name of our file. So that's the web address, and if we load it, we'll see what happens when we call that Php Info Function. That one little line of code returns a whole lot of information about the server and its environment. We can find things like our user's IP address, which would be helpful if we're concerned about, having unauthorized users access our site. It'll tell us whether our site is encrypted. It'll tell us what kind of server we're running, all of these things from that one little function. It'll tell us the file paths, what type of web server it is. This is an Apache server. So we get all of this stuff. Notice, though, if I view my page source, so here's my source code. It says PHP Info. What's going to happen if I search the page source for the words PHP Info? So if I do a find and type PHP Info, it shows it in the title, but if I search anywhere else, it says it's reached the end of the page. Why does our code, our PHP code, why does it not show up here on the page? Yeah, it's private, which is a good thing, right? We don't want that code going to our end users. We only want the user to see the HTML. We don't want them seeing our PHP. That's why it's called server-side scripting, right? Because our PHP code lives and executes on the web server. It doesn't get sent back to the user to see. The browser only sees the HTML output of our pages. I'm going to change mine for a minute, show you why these PHP tags are so important. Let's say I take out my PHP tags. I'm going to save my file. You don't have to do this. I'm just going to show you what happens. So if I re-upload it, what's going to happen when I refresh the page? What will we see in the browser? Oops, hang on. Let me just delete that. Okay. Somehow it's interesting that it notes PHP code. I'm also going to save this. I'm going to save this as test.htm. So I'm going to show you the importance of the PHP extension. So I've got my PHP tags here, but my file has an HTML extension. Oh, it's because I'm in the wrong folder. Sorry, I'm in the wrong folder. That's why I'm not uploading the right file. It would help if I uploaded the right file. Sorry, here were my files. If I upload, I know, it's almost time to get out of here. This is the only page we're doing. So here's what happens without those PHP tags, right? It actually just prints the code to the page. So this is dangerous and a problem, right? Maybe our code contains database connections. If we do go to the HTML version, I have my tags. Okay, well, it didn't print, our function didn't run, but it didn't print my code out, right? Wrong, there it is. So even though it didn't get sent to the browser visually, it's in the source of the page. Okay? So having the .php extension and having those two tags is critical. Or not only does our PHP code not run, but we've just published our PHP code for the world to see. Okay? So those are things we'll want to avoid and keep in mind. Okay. Let me just undo this. So I will put the proper one back up. Okay, so that's all we're going to do today. So next week, just to give you a preview of what we're going to do. To start a class by 3:05, we're going to have a quick review quiz for 1% on today's class. You were all here, and I didn't see too many people on Facebook for too much of the time, so I think everybody will do fine. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to need to connect to our MySQL database. We're going to need to set up a video games table. And then we're going to start building a page so that we can add video games into our database. That'll be step 1. Okay, so that we'll get that part working for next week. So make sure you install your local web server for next week. Make sure you find a code editor you like. And if you have any trouble getting anything ready before next week's class, come and see me during office hours so I can help you. So when you come to class next Monday, you're all set to go. Okay, that's it. Have a great week, everybody. See you next week.